My mother stood in my parents' living room speaking into a microphone and said, "We're all here because you've become selfish, ungrateful, and you're pulling this family apart." It was my 30th birthday. 40 people sat in folding chairs, all staring at me like I was on trial. My father held a 3-page list of every mistake they believed I had made since I was 8 years old. My older sister had her phone pointed directly at my face, streaming the whole thing live on TikTok. I didn't cry, I didn't walk out. I just sat there, let them say everything they had planned to say, and then I spoke 6 words that changed the entire night. Funny, I've been recording too. What happened over the next 11 minutes ended 6 relationships in that room, and my sister deleted her entire TikTok account before she even reached her car. Before I continue, please take a second to like and subscribe, but only if this story genuinely pulls you in. And leave your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where people are watching from. My name is Faith. I'm 30 years old, and I work as an emergency nurse in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio. This is the story of how my family planned a surprise intervention for my birthday, and how it turned into the most unforgettable night the Mercer family had ever seen. But to understand how we got there, I need to take you back 3 months earlier to a phone call I was never meant to hear. First, you need to understand what my life looked like before everything unraveled. It was a Friday night. I had just finished a 14-hour shift in the emergency department. The kind of shift that leaves your body moving, but your mind completely drained. There had been 2 serious road incidents, 1 critical heart emergency, and a little boy who had swallowed a quarter. My scrubs smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee. I was sitting in my car in the hospital parking lot with the engine off, my eyes closed, just trying to breathe for a minute before driving home. Then I checked my phone. 3 messages. The first was from my mother. "Faith, the insurance bill came in. Can you cover it this month? Your dad's hours got cut again." The second was from my older sister, Kristen. "Hey, can I borrow $400? I need this online course for my brand." The third was from my father. Just a photo of a roofing invoice, no explanation, no greeting, just the bill. I opened my banking app and did the same math I had done every month. My parents' mortgage payment, $1,100. My mom's health insurance supplement, $340. Kristen's car payment, $280. Groceries I dropped off every Sunday, about $150. Altogether, it came to around $2,100 a month, nearly half of what I brought home. Meanwhile, I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with IKEA furniture, a refrigerator that usually held 2 meal prep containers and a half-empty bottle of hot sauce, and a 2014 Civic with 130,000 miles on it. I hadn't taken a vacation since I graduated nursing school. 8 years. Not one real break. And the strange part is I never complained. Not once. I grew up watching my grandmother Ruth stretch every dollar until it could barely stretch anymore. She taught me that family takes care of family, so that's what I did. I took care of them. I just didn't understand yet that there is a very big difference between helping someone and being quietly drained by them, and I was about to learn that lesson the hard way, because the money I had been sending was not always going where I thought it was. Every Sunday, we had dinner at my parents' house, same routine every week. I arrived at 4, helped my mother with the food, set the table, and washed whatever dishes had been left in the sink from the night before. By the time everyone else sat down to eat, I had already been working for an hour. That particular Sunday, my mother was glowing as she talked to my father about Kristen's TikTok account. "She's building a personal brand," Mom said proudly. "Life coaching. She already has almost 2,000 followers." My father nodded like Kristen had just been accepted into Harvard. I waited for a pause in the conversation. "I got promoted last week," I said. "Charge nurse. It's a leadership position." My mother reached for the breadbasket without even looking up. "That's nice, honey. Can you grab the salad from the fridge?" Kristen walked in 45 minutes late, carrying a bottle of wine. It wasn't expensive, but my mother still rushed over and hugged her at the door like she had arrived from another country. I had been there since 4 o'clock. Nobody hugged me. Kristen sat across from me, flipped her hair over her shoulder, and that's when I noticed her earrings, small pearls, vintage setting. I knew that setting. "Those are pretty," I said. "They look like Grandma Ruth's." Kristen gave a casual shrug. "Aunt Jeanette gave them to me." She said Grandma didn't want them anymore. I looked at my mother. Suddenly she was very focused on her mashed potatoes. Grandma Ruth wore those pearls every time I visited her. Every single time. She had not simply decided she didn't want them anymore, but no one at that table wanted to talk about it. So I let it go. That was what I did. I let the comments go. I let the favoritism go. I let the silence go, even when gratitude should have been there. I became very good at swallowing things I should have questioned, until the night I finally couldn't. 3 months before my birthday, on a Tuesday evening, I stopped by my parents' house to grab a jacket I had forgotten there the Sunday before. The back door was unlocked. It always was. I stepped inside quietly. The kitchen light was on, and I could hear voices from around the corner. My mother and Kristen were talking. I almost called out. Almost. Then I heard my name. "We'll do it on her birthday," my mother said. "Everyone is already coming. We'll sit her down and tell her the truth. She's selfish. She uses money to control us, and we're done tiptoeing around her." My hand froze against the doorframe. Kristen laughed. "I'll record the whole thing," she said. "This is exactly the kind of content my page needs. Real, emotional family moments." Then she paused. "But what if she stops paying?" My mother laughed, short and confident, like the idea was too ridiculous to even consider. "She won't. She's been paying for 8 years. She didn't stop when I missed her college graduation. She didn't stop when your father said her career was just bedpans and paperwork. She's not going to stop because of one uncomfortable evening." "But what if she does?" "Then 40 people will have just watched us ask her for help. If she walks away after that, she proves everything we said about her. Either way, she has nowhere to go." "Good," Kristen said. "And if she gets emotional, even better. It'll show everyone she can't handle the truth." I stood there for maybe 10 seconds. It felt like 10 minutes. My heartbeat was pounding in my ears, and my legs felt like they had gone hollow. I backed out through the door without making a sound, got into my car, and sat in the driveway with both hands on the steering wheel, staring at the garage door. I stayed there for 20 minutes. Then I called Naomi. Naomi had been my best friend since college. She was also a civil rights attorney. I told her everything, word for word. She didn't interrupt me once. When I finished, she asked one question. "Do you still have that voice recorder app from the hospital issue last year?" I did. I had downloaded it after a patient's family made a serious complaint against the hospital. Naomi had been the one who told me to keep it, just in case. "Keep it," she said, "and start using it." I didn't plan some dramatic payback that night. I planned protection. I just didn't know yet how much protection I was going to need. Over the next few days, I did what I always did when life became too much. I made a list. Not a list of feelings, a list of consequences. If the birthday intervention happened and I just sat there quietly, 40 people would walk out of that room believing I was the selfish daughter tearing her family apart. 40 people in a town where everyone knew everyone, and 3 of them worked at my hospital. My mother had invited them. I found that out through Naomi, who sent me a screenshot from a mutual friend. My mother had messaged Marcus, my direct supervisor, along with Carla from the ER and Dr. Pham. She told them it was a surprise birthday gathering and said she would love for Faith's work friends to come show support. Show support. That was how she described it. If Marcus sat in that living room and watched my mother take apart my character in front of everyone, every conversation I had with him afterward would carry that shadow. Her own family thinks she's the problem. In a small hospital, reputation matters. And my mother was getting ready to damage mine in front of witnesses. If I defended myself during the intervention, if I argued, if my voice even shook too much, they would use it as proof. See? This is exactly what we mean. If I didn't show up at all, my mother would tell everyone, "She didn't even come. That's how selfish she is." 3 choices, all of them traps. I explained all of this to Naomi over coffee, my hands wrapped around a mug I wasn't drinking from. She stirred her latte and said, "They built the stage. You didn't choose the audience, but you can still choose what story they hear." I looked at her. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means you need a 4th option." I stared at her. She stared right back. And that was the moment the plan stopped being about simply protecting myself. It became about the truth. Here's something a lot of people don't know about Ohio. It's a one-party consent state. That means if I'm part of a conversation, or present while it's happening, I can legally record it. Naomi confirmed it twice, so I started recording, not with a hidden camera, not with anything dramatic, just an app on my phone. Before I walked into my parents' house every Sunday, I opened it. When I left, I turned it off. That was it. Simple. The first week, nothing happened. My mother talked about a church bake sale. My father watched football. Kristen didn't even show up. The second week, I was standing at the kitchen sink after dinner, rinsing plates, when I heard my father's voice coming from the garage. The door was slightly open. He was on the phone. His voice sounded different, softer, lighter, almost like a teenager talking to someone he was trying to impress. "Yeah, Linda, Tuesday works," he said. "Diane has Bible study. I'll tell her I'm picking up parts from the store." A woman laughed on the other end. Warm, comfortable, familiar. "She doesn't suspect anything," my father said. 22 years and she still thinks I go bowling on Tuesdays." I gripped the edge of the sink so tightly my knuckles turned white. A plate slipped and tapped against the basin. I caught it before it made too much noise. My father didn't hear. He was still laughing. I finished the dishes. I dried my hands. I walked out to my car, sat down, and looked at my phone. The app was still running. The waveform was still moving. I hadn't been looking for that. I had only been looking for a way to protect myself. But a recorder doesn't choose what matters. It catches whatever is said. And apparently, in the Mercer house, there was a lot worth catching. By week 4, I arrived 20 minutes early for Sunday dinner. The front door was locked, so I went around back. My mother's bedroom window was open just a little. Her voice drifted outside. She was on the phone, speaker on, and I could hear both sides. "Gary doesn't know about the $14,000, my mother said. "I moved it into my personal account right after Mom's estate sale. He thinks the furniture sold for less than it actually did." Then I heard Aunt Jeanette's voice through the speaker, small and slightly distorted. "Smart. And the pearls." "I already sold the bracelet," Jeanette said. "Got $800 for it. If Ruth asks, we'll just say it's still at the jeweler being cleaned." "Fine," my mother said. "Just don't let Faith find out. She's the only one who still visits Ruth every week. If Ruth asks about that bracelet, Faith will start asking questions." "Faith won't find out," Jeanette replied. "She's too busy paying your mortgage." Then they both laughed. I stood in the backyard beside the recycling bin, listening to my mother and my aunt laugh about taking from my 82-year-old grandmother. My phone was in my jacket pocket. The red recording bar pulsed quietly on the screen. $14,000. That was almost 7 months of the mortgage payments I had been covering. The mortgage, I believed, was helping keep a roof over my parents' heads while they struggled. But they were not struggling the way they had made me believe. My mother had $14,000 hidden in a personal account my father didn't even know existed, money from my grandmother's estate. And while that money sat there, I was eating meal-prepped dinners out of plastic containers and driving a car with a cracked windshield. By then, I had 2 secrets saved on my phone. And there were still 6 weeks left before my birthday, 6 more weeks of Sunday dinners, 6 more weeks of smiling when I walked through the door. I could do that. I had been doing it for years. The next Sunday, Derek didn't come to dinner. He was picking up an extra shift, doing electrical work at a new development on the edge of town. Derek worked hard. He always had. When Kristen first married him, she used to brag about that. But that night she wasn't bragging. After 2 glasses of wine, Kristen leaned toward my mother across the table. I was sitting at the other end, cutting into my chicken, invisible as usual. "Derek is useless," Kristen said. She kept her voice low, but the dining room was small. "He can't fix the sink. He can't get promoted. I married a man who peaked at 35. My mother didn't even blink. "You could have done better." Kristen let out a bitter little laugh. "I wish I had never said yes at that altar. I keep thinking that if I hadn't gotten pregnant that first year, I would have left." My mother patted her hand like she was comforting her. "You still have time." My father was in the living room. He didn't hear them. Or maybe he just didn't care enough to listen. I said nothing. I kept eating my chicken. My phone sat in my lap, recording every word. 40 minutes later, we were clearing the plates when Kristen stepped into the hallway with her phone to her ear. Her voice changed instantly. Soft, sweet, warm. "Hey, honey. Miss you, babe. Save me some leftovers, okay? You're the best thing in my life." She ended the call, walked back into the kitchen, and poured herself a third glass of wine. I looked at my sister, this woman who had just called her husband useless, who had said she regretted marrying him, and who minutes later told him he was the best thing in her life. And I thought about Derek, probably standing on some job site right then, pulling wire through unfinished walls because he wanted to provide for a wife who spoke about him like that when he wasn't around. Everyone in my family wore a mask. I had been the only one who didn't. Not anymore. 2 weeks before my birthday, Naomi sent me another screenshot. It was a Facebook message from my mother to a woman named Peggy, who happened to be friends with Carla from the ER. My mother had asked Peggy to pass the invitation along to my work friends. The message read, "We'd love for Faith's work friends to be there. It's a special evening. We want the people who matter most to her to show their support." I stared at those words. Show their support. Then Naomi sent a second screenshot. My mother had messaged Marcus directly. Marcus, my supervisor, the man who approved my schedule, reviewed my performance, and had real influence over my future at that hospital. "Marcus, you've known Faith for years. I think it would mean the world to her if you came." My hands started shaking. For the first time in this entire process, my hands actually shook. I called Naomi. My voice cracked once, then I forced it steady. She invited Marcus, and Carla, and Dr. Pham. There was silence on the line. Then Naomi said, "That changes things." "That's my career, Naomi. If Marcus sits in that living room and watches my mother call me selfish and ungrateful, if he sees my father reading a list of everything they think I've done wrong like I'm on trial, he'll never look at me the same way again. No one will." Naomi's voice stayed calm. "Then we don't just get through that night. We make sure the truth is louder than their version of it." I closed my eyes and took a breath. The kind of breath I take before a hospital emergency. Deep, careful, controlled, the kind that separates fear from action. My mother had turned my birthday, my family, and my workplace into one carefully planned trap. She thought she had covered every possible outcome. She had not counted on the fourth door. 10 days before my birthday, Naomi and I sat in her car outside a coffee shop. The engine was off, and rain slid down the windshield in thin, crooked lines. "Ground rules," Naomi said. She started counting on her fingers. 1. You walk in like it's a normal party. You smile. You greet people. You don't let them know you suspect anything. "Okay," I said. 2. When they start, Naomi said, you let them speak. All the way through. Don't interrupt them. "Fine." 3. When they're done, you calmly ask to speak in private, just once. You say, "Can we talk about this privately, as a family?" I nodded. "And if they say no, that brings us to Rule 4. She looked straight at me. "If they refuse to stop, if they insist on doing this in front of 40 people, then you play the recordings. Their choice, their stage, your truth." I nodded again. "Ohio is a one-party consent state," she reminded me for the third time. "You were present for every conversation you recorded. It's allowed. The fallout won't be about the law. It'll be about people finally seeing what's been hidden." I looked down at my phone. There were 4 audio files in a folder I had named Insurance. Not because I was trying to be clever, because that was exactly what they were. File 1, Dad and Linda. File 2, Mom and Aunt Jeanette talking about the money and the jewelry. File 3, Kristen talking about Derek. File 4, Mom and Kristen planning my birthday ambush. I backed everything up to cloud storage and sent copies to Naomi's email. "One more thing," Naomi said. She reached into the back seat and placed a small Bluetooth speaker on the console. It was black, about the size of a soda can. "Your phone speaker won't be loud enough for a room full of people." I picked it up. It was light. It looked harmless. "You don't have to raise your voice," she said. "You just have to press play." I hope I don't need it, but by then I had stopped expecting much from my family. Saturday morning, one day before my birthday, I drove 40 minutes to Maple Ridge, the assisted living facility where Grandma Ruth lived. Her room smelled like lavender lotion and old books. She was sitting by the window in her wheelchair, filling out a crossword puzzle with a pen. Not a pencil. A pen. That was Grandma Ruth. "There's my Saturday girl," she said when I walked in. I pulled up a chair. We did what we always did. She told me stories about Grandpa Earl. I brought her butterscotch candies. We watched 15 minutes of Wheel of Fortune together, even though it was a rerun. During a commercial, she looked over at me. "Big birthday tomorrow," she said. "Your mother planning something?" "She is." "Good." Grandma adjusted her reading glasses. "I hope she's being kind about it." I didn't answer. She reached over and took my hand. Her skin was thin as tissue paper, but her grip was still strong. "Your grandfather always said Mercer women are loud," she said, "but the strongest ones are quiet." I squeezed her hand. Then she asked about the jewelry in that casual way she had, like she already knew the answer but wanted to see what you would say. "Jeanette was supposed to bring back my bracelet last month, the pearl one with the clasp. I still haven't seen it." My throat tightened. I knew that bracelet had been sold for $800. I knew because I had heard my aunt say it out loud while my mother laughed along. "I'm sure it'll turn up, Grandma." She studied my face for a moment, but she didn't push. When I left, she sent me a text message. She had only recently learned how to use the phone I bought her last Christmas, so the message was full of typos. But I understood every word. "Whatever they do tonight, remember who raised you on Saturdays. I am proud of you always." I sat in my car and read it 3 times. That evening, Naomi came over to my apartment with takeout and the Bluetooth speaker. We ate pad thai on my couch, the one piece of furniture I actually loved, while she walked me through the plan one more time. "The speaker connects to your phone in 3 seconds, she said, holding it up. I tested it at my office. The audio is clear from across the room. "I'll keep it in my purse," I said, with the top unzipped. "Will you sit?" "Back row, close to the door." "If things go sideways?" "You'll be right there." I picked up the speaker again. It was such a small thing, just a little cylinder of black plastic. And somehow, tomorrow night, it might become the loudest thing in the room. "If I don't use it," I said, "we go home, eat cake, and I spend my 30s in therapy." Naomi didn't laugh. "And if you do use it," she said, "then for once, the right people will be uncomfortable." She paused with her chopsticks halfway to her mouth. "Faith, I need you to really understand this. Once you press play, you can't take it back. Your dad and Linda, your mom and the money, Kristen and Derek, all of it becomes public in front of everyone. There is no version of tomorrow night where things just go back to normal." "Naomi, normal is me paying their mortgage while they plan to embarrass me in front of a crowd. Normal is my sister insulting her husband behind his back, then planning to film me for attention online. Normal was never good." She nodded slowly. For a minute, we just sat there in silence. My apartment was quiet. My phone sat on the table, 4 audio files lined up in a row. Each one was a door that only opened one way. "Try to sleep," Naomi said when she left. I didn't. Not because I was scared, because I was finished rehearsing what I would say once they finally stopped talking. At 2 a.m, I sat on my bed with the lights off and my earbuds in, listening to the recordings one last time. File 1. My father's voice, relaxed and careless. "Tuesday works, Linda. Diane has Bible study." Then his laugh, a laugh I never heard at the dinner table. File 2. My mother and Aunt Jeanette. "Gary doesn't know about the 14,000. Then Jeanette's voice, smooth and calm. "I already sold the bracelet, got 800. File 3. Kristen, bold after too much wine and full of resentment. "Derek is useless. I wish I had never said yes at that altar." Then, 40 minutes later, her voice sweet as Sunday morning. "You're the best thing in my life, babe." File 4, the one that started it all. My mother's voice, calm and organized, like she was planning a church fundraiser. "We'll do it on her birthday. We'll tell her she's selfish. If she breaks down, even better." I pulled out my earbuds. The apartment was silent. The streetlight outside painted a thin orange line across my ceiling. My family was building a courtroom in their living room. They had written the charges. They had invited the witnesses. They had rehearsed their version of events. They even had their own camera crew. My sister streaming my lowest moment for strangers online. And they had no idea that the person they were putting on display had more truth in her pocket than anyone in that room was ready to hear. I plugged in my phone, set my alarm for 9, and closed my eyes. Tomorrow was my birthday, 30 years old. I used to think turning 30 would feel like a milestone, a celebration. a beginning. Instead, it felt like a decision had already been made. But here was the part they didn't know. That decision was not about me. It was about them. Let me pause the story for a second, because I want to be honest with you. The night before, I almost didn't go. I almost packed a bag, drove to Naomi's apartment, and spent my birthday eating ice cream while pretending none of this was happening. But one thought stopped me. If I didn't show up, they would tell the story without me. 40 people would hear only their version, and I would become the person who couldn't even face her own family. So let me ask you this. What would you have done? Would you have walked into that room knowing what was waiting for you? Or would you have stayed home? Tell me in the comments. Now let me take you to the night itself. I pulled into my parents' driveway at 6:15. Cars lined the street in both directions. I counted 11, then 12. This was more than a birthday dinner. More than a surprise party. My phone was charged, the recorder was ready, the speaker was already paired. I smoothed my blouse, checked my reflection, took one deep breath, and walked through the front door. The living room had been completely rearranged. The couch was pushed against the wall. The coffee table was gone. In its place were 4 rows of folding chairs, maybe 10 across, all facing one spot at the front of the room. And there, waiting under the lights, stood a microphone on a shiny chrome stand. Behind it, taped to the wood paneling, was a banner made from white butcher paper, blue marker, block letters. "We love you enough to tell the truth." There was no cake, no streamers, no gifts. I scanned the room. 40 faces looked back at me. Some people smiled nervously. Some looked down the second our eyes almost met. I noticed them one by one. Marcus, my supervisor, sat in the second row with his arms crossed. Carla was beside him, holding her purse like she wished she could disappear into it. Dr. Pham stood near the back, looking like he had walked into the wrong house. There were neighbors I had known since childhood. 2 of my mother's Bible study friends sat together in matching cardigans. Cousins I only saw once a year at Thanksgiving were scattered through the room. Even Kristen's college roommate was there, and in the far corner stood Kristen, behind a tripod. Her phone was mounted on it, the little red dot glowing. She was live. Naomi sat in the last row near the door. Her purse rested in her lap, the zipper open just enough. She gave me the smallest nod. I looked at the microphone, then the banner, then the 40 people who had shown up to watch my family put me in the center of the room and call it love. Finally, I looked at the empty chair in the very front row, centered, facing everyone, my seat. So I sat down. My mother stepped up to the microphone. She was wearing her good cream blouse, the one she usually saved for church. Her hands were steady. Her smile was warm, polished, and familiar, the same smile she wore at potluck dinners when she wanted everyone to think everything was perfect. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "I know this isn't what Faith expected tonight, but as a family we decided it was time to be honest." She pulled a folded paper from her pocket and opened it carefully. "Faith, honey," she said, turning toward me, "we love you, but we can't keep pretending everything is fine." Then she started reading. She told the room I was selfish. She said I used money to control people. She said I made my family feel like they had to beg, as if I treated them like a project instead of people I loved. She told them I was cold, that I never called my father on Father's Day. She did not mention that for the last 3 years my father had not picked up the phone on Father's Day because he was always supposedly picking up parts. She said I was dividing the family, that Sunday dinners had become uncomfortable because of my attitude. Then she paused and looked at me with soft, practiced concern. "We're not doing this to hurt you, Faith. We're doing this because nobody else had the courage." The room was completely quiet. A folding chair creaked. Someone coughed. Marcus uncrossed his arms and leaned forward. He was watching closely. I could feel it. 2 of my mother's Bible study friends nodded along. The woman in the green cardigan even dabbed at her eyes. She believed every word. I sat perfectly still, hands resting on my knees, face calm. It was the same expression I used at work when a patient's family member was upset and I had to stay focused, present, quiet, controlled, because my mother was not finished, and neither was my father. Dad stood up. He didn't look at me. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out 3 sheets of lined paper, folded in thirds and covered in handwriting. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was not his. It was my mother's. She had written the list. He was only there to read it. He cleared his throat. Faith, your mother and I made this together. It's a record of patterns, things we've noticed. Then he began. Faith, age 8, broke the kitchen window while playing ball and lied about it. I had not broken that window. Kristen had thrown a softball through it. I was outside when it happened, but I got blamed because Kristen started crying first. Faith, age 13, told her aunt she didn't want to go to church camp. That part was true. Church camp was in July, and I had signed up for a summer reading program at the library. My mother called it being difficult. Faith, age 15, refused to let Kristen borrow her car for prom. I was 15. I did not own a car. Kristen wanted to take Mom's car. Mom said no. Somehow, I still became the reason she was upset. Faith, age 22, moved out without asking permission. 22, moved out without asking permission. He kept reading for 7 minutes. 7 full minutes of old memories twisted into accusations and held up in front of a room full of people. Nobody interrupted. A few people shifted in their seats. Carla had her hand over her mouth. Derek, Kristen's husband, stared down at his shoes. Finally, Dad folded the pages and looked at me for the first time all evening. We raised you better than this, Faith. Then he sat down. The room waited. So did I. I let 10 seconds pass in complete silence. I wanted everyone there to feel the heaviness of what had just happened. Then I stood up. The chair scraped softly behind me, and every head in the room turned. Mom, Dad. My voice was even, steady, calmer than I felt. I hear you. I understand that you feel strongly about this. Can we discuss it privately? Just the 4 of us? My mother shook her head before I even finished speaking. No, this is exactly why we're doing it here, because when it's private, you shut us down. These people are here as witnesses. Witnesses, I repeated. Sit down, Faith, my father said. From the corner, Kristen added, just let them finish. This is good for you. She adjusted her phone on the tripod. The red dot kept blinking. Still live. I looked around the room one more time, slowly. Marcus was typing something on his phone. Maybe it was a note. Maybe a message. Maybe something he would remember later when he thought about my future at the hospital. The woman in the green cardigan was nodding again. She thought this was love. She thought she was watching a family brave enough to be honest. Then I looked at Naomi. She sat perfectly still, one hand resting near the open purse. Inside it, the speaker was waiting. Then I looked at Derek. He was staring at Kristen's tripod with an expression I knew from the ER confusion, turning into the kind of fear people feel when they finally realize something is very wrong. I took one slow breath, the kind of breath I take before making a decision that cannot be undone, not because this was the ending, because this was the moment everything truly began. Okay, I said, you've had your turn. I opened my purse and pulled out my phone. Then I held it up so everyone in the room could see it. Funny, I said. I've been recording too. The room went completely silent. Then I pressed play. The Bluetooth speaker came to life from inside Naomi's purse. Clear, loud, every word sharp enough for the back row to hear. My father's voice filled the living room. Yeah, Linda, Tuesday works. Diane has Bible study. I'll tell her I'm picking up parts at the store. A woman laughed on the other end. Warm, comfortable, familiar. She doesn't suspect anything, my father continued. 22 years and she still thinks I go bowling on Tuesdays. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The silence in that room became heavy, almost physical. My mother turned toward my father. The color left her face all at once, like someone had switched off the light behind her eyes. Dad jolted forward in his chair. Turn that off. Turn that off. I didn't move. The recording kept playing. My father's voice stayed easy and careless. I'll bring dinner. That Italian place you like. She'll never know. The woman in the green cardigan stood up first. She looked at my mother, then at my father, then at the door. She picked up her coat and walked out without saying a word. Her friend followed right behind her. My mother gripped the back of a folding chair so tightly her knuckles turned pale. She was not looking at me anymore. She was looking at him. Gary, she whispered. Diane, it's not... You have to understand. 22 years, she said, her voice breaking. Bowling. The whole room felt like it was holding its breath. People glanced at each other, then quickly looked away. Some stared at the floor. Marcus had placed his phone face down on his thigh. I tapped my screen and the recording stopped. Then I looked around the room. My voice was calm, almost clinical. That was recording 1. I paused. There are 3 more. No one breathed. No one moved. Behind me, the banner still hung on the wall. We love you enough to tell the truth. It had never looked more fitting. I pressed play on the second file. This time, my mother's voice filled the room. Confident. Quietly pleased with herself. The voice she used when she thought no one outside her circle would ever hear her. Gary doesn't know about the $14,000, she said. I moved it to my personal account right after Mom's estate sale. He thinks the furniture sold for less. Then came Aunt Jeanette's voice through the speaker. Smart? And the pearls? I already sold the bracelet, Jeanette said. Got $800 for it. If Ruth asks, we'll just say it's at the jeweler being cleaned. My father turned toward my mother. His face was a mess of emotion now. Shame from the first recording, anger from the second. $14,000, he said slowly. From Ruth's estate? Gary, you told me the auction brought in $4,000 total. That's taken out of context. Aunt Jeanette was in the 3rd row. She shot up from her chair like she couldn't sit there another second. Diane, you told me no one would ever find out. That was when the room finally broke open. Not into shouting, into whispers. A low wave of shock moved through the chairs. A cousin I barely knew leaned toward Jeanette. You sold Grandma Ruth's bracelet? The pearl one? Jeanette opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. Nothing came out. My mother's other Bible study friend, the one who had stayed, stood up next. She clutched her purse to her chest and looked at my mother with an expression I can only describe as sudden understanding. Like every conversation they had ever had was replaying in her mind with a completely different meaning. Then she left too. My father sat gripping his knees. My mother stood alone near the microphone, her speech crumpled in one hand. I stopped the recording. That was 2. 4 relationships were cracking in real time, and I still had 2 files left. The room was no longer watching me. They were watching each other. Then I looked at Kristen. She was still standing behind her tripod, but the red dot was gone. At some point during the first 2 recordings, she had ended the live stream, but it didn't matter anymore. People had already seen enough, and whatever had happened online was no longer fully in her control. Her eyes were wide. She knew what was coming next. I pressed play. Kristen's voice came through the speaker, slightly loose from wine, but clear enough for every person in that room to understand. Derek is useless. He can't fix the sink. He can't get promoted. I married a man who peaked at 35. Then my mother's voice answered, You could have done better. Kristen again. I wish I had never said yes at that altar. The audio was painfully clear. Every word, every pause, every breath. Derek sat in the 2nd row. Until that moment he had been quiet, confused, hands clasped between his knees. Now he went still. Not the kind of still that comes from surprise, the kind that comes from finally hearing something you always feared might be true. He stood up slowly. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at my mother, my father, or Aunt Jeanette. He looked only at Kristen. She saw him, and her face fell apart. Derek, she said. Derek, wait. That's not what I didn't mean it like that. He said nothing. Not one word. He held her gaze for 3 seconds. I counted them. Then he walked down the center aisle between the folding chairs and out the front door. He didn't slam it. He simply closed it behind him. A soft click. Somehow it sounded louder than everything else that had happened that night. Kristen rushed to the tripod and grabbed her phone. I watched her tap the screen over and over, trying to erase the stream, the app, and every trace of the night she had created. Now she was crying, and no one moved to comfort her. The last file. For a second, I almost didn't play it. The room was already broken open. Everyone had heard enough to know this night would never be forgotten, but this recording was different. This one wasn't about hidden money, secret relationships, or cruel things said behind closed doors. This one was about me. About tonight. About the truth that this had never really been an intervention. It was a performance my mother had written, My father had delivered, and my sister had planned to turn into content with 40 people unknowingly placed in the audience. So I pressed play. My mother's voice filled the room again, from 3 months earlier, in the same kitchen where I had grown up. "We'll do it on her birthday," she said. "We'll sit her down, tell her she's selfish. If she breaks down, even better. It'll show everyone she can't handle the truth." Then Kristen's voice came through. "I'll film the whole thing. My page needs content like this. Real family moments." Then my mother again. "And if she threatens to stop paying the mortgage, we'll tell everyone she's abandoning her family. She won't risk that." The recording ended. I let the silence stay. All 40 people now knew the truth. Not my mother's version, not the version written on the banner, not the version in my father's 3-page list. The real version. Marcus picked up his phone from his lap and slid it into his pocket slowly, like he was being very careful with the moment. I could see it on his face. He wasn't confused anymore. He was putting every piece together. My father sat slumped in a folding chair, his chin lowered toward his chest. My mother stood alone at the front of the room. No one was standing near her now. The microphone was still there on its shiny stand, but at that point, it looked less like a microphone and more like a marker for something that had just ended. I lowered my phone. "That was the last one," I said, quietly. No victory in my voice, no sharpness, just the truth. Now everyone knows exactly who has been selfish in this family. I paused. It wasn't me. Let me stop here for a second. When I played those recordings, my hands stayed steady. My stomach did not, because I knew that the second I pressed play, there would be no way to take it back. Nobody in that room would ever look at each other the same way again, and neither would I. So I have to ask you, do you think I went too far? Or do you think I should have played the recordings even sooner, the moment my mother stepped up to that microphone? Tell me in the comments. And if you're still here, thank you. Because the story is not over. What happened next was the part that actually changed my life. The living room looked like the aftermath of something, because that was exactly what it was. Kristen had already rushed out after Derek. Aunt Jeanette sat with her arms wrapped tightly around herself, staring at the carpet. My father was on one side of the room. My mother was on the other. Between them were 4 folding chairs and a lie that had lasted 22 years. I put my phone back in my purse and stood up straight. I didn't raise my voice. I wanted to say this once, clearly enough that no one could pretend they misunderstood. Starting tonight, I will no longer be paying the mortgage on this house. I will no longer be covering the insurance premium. And I will no longer be making Kristen's car payments. I've already set every recurring transfer to stop, effective at midnight. My mother's head snapped toward me. "You can't do that." "You depend on me," I said. "Not the other way around. And you just spent the last half hour telling a room full of people how awful I am, so I'm giving you what you asked for." I looked right at her. A life without my selfishness. Somewhere in the back, one of my cousins let out a low whistle. Carla nodded quietly. I caught it from the corner of my eye. My mother opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Faith, this isn't... You're overreacting." "I asked to speak privately," I said. "You said no. I asked for this to stop. You said no. I'm not overreacting, I'm responding." I looked toward Naomi. "Ready?" She stood, slipped her purse over her shoulder, and walked toward me. I turned back to the room one final time. "Thank you for coming. I'm sorry this wasn't the party you expected." Then I started walking toward the door. My mother's intervention was over. Mine had just begun. I was 3 steps from the exit when Marcus stood. In 6 years of working under him, I had seen Marcus stand up for plenty of things. Patient rights, staffing issues, fair scheduling. He wasn't a dramatic man. He never needed to be loud to be heard. "Faith," I stopped. He buttoned his jacket and stepped into the aisle. "I've worked with you for 6 years," he said. "I've seen you sit beside a patient in their final moments at 3 a.m, then return to your charting 15 minutes later without missing a step. I know exactly who you are." He paused. "This changes nothing at my hospital, except maybe that my respect for you just increased." He said it at a normal volume, but in that room, in that moment, it felt like a final ruling. Then Carla stood. She grabbed her coat. "I'm driving you home," she said. "You shouldn't be alone tonight." Something shifted inside my chest. Not exactly relief, but something close to it. Like setting down a heavy bag I had carried for so long I had forgotten it was there. I passed my mother on the way out. She grabbed my sleeve. Her fingers were trembling. "Faith, please." I stopped. I looked at her hand on my arm. Then I looked at her face. "Mom," I said, "you had a microphone. I had a phone." I gently pulled my sleeve free. The difference is, mine told the truth. Then I walked out the front door. I didn't slam it. I closed it the same way Derek had. Gently, with one small click. On the porch, I checked my phone. There was a text from Grandma Ruth sent 2 hours earlier. She always went to bed early. "Happy birthday, my girl. You are the best of us." I pressed the phone against my chest and stood there in the cool Ohio air until Carla pulled the car around. Carla drove. Naomi sat in the back. For the first 2 minutes, nobody said anything. The only sounds were the tires moving over the wet road and the quiet hum of the heater. Then Naomi finally asked, "Are you okay?" I really thought about it. Not the polite answer, the honest one. "I don't know yet," I said. She nodded. "That's enough for now." We were on Route 33, halfway back to my apartment, when I opened my phone again and read Grandma Ruth's message out loud. The whole thing, typos and all. "Whatever they do tonight, remember who raised you on Saturdays. I am proud of you always." Carla's hands tightened around the steering wheel. Naomi made a small sound from the back seat. Not quite crying, but close. "Your grandma," Carla said, "sounds like the kind of woman I'd want in my corner." I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed all night, and it came out uneven, cracked, and wet. Naomi leaned forward between the seats. "She raised you right, Faith," she said. "The rest of them are just noise." When we pulled into my apartment complex, everything looked the same. Same parking lot, same cracked asphalt, same building. But somehow it felt different. Maybe cleaner, maybe just mine. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and dropped my purse on the counter. 36 unread messages were waiting on my phone. I didn't open them. Not that night. Instead, I opened my banking app. 3 recurring transfers. Mortgage, $1,100. Insurance, $340. Kristen's car payment, $280. I canceled them one by one. Confirm, confirm, confirm. Done. Then I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark and listened to the silence. No calls I had to return, no bills I had to cover for someone else, no Sunday dinner I had to prepare for. For the first time in 8 years, my paycheck belonged to me. It was quiet. It was small. It was everything. On Monday, the day after the birthday gathering, my father moved out. Not in some dramatic scene. No shouting in the driveway, no suitcases scattered across the lawn. He simply packed a duffel bag and drove to his friend Bill's house. He didn't tell my mother. She came home from the grocery store and found his side of the closet half empty. That day, she called me 14 times. I didn't answer. Not because I was trying to punish her, because I had nothing left to say. On day 3, Kristen called. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. "Derek filed for separation. He won't talk to me. He changed the locks." "I'm sorry to hear that, Kristen," I said. "You destroyed my marriage." I closed my eyes and held the phone slightly away from my ear. "You damaged your marriage in that kitchen 6 weeks ago," I said. I only pressed play. She hung up. On day 5, I got a call from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. He told me he had called Grandma Ruth to ask about the bracelet. Ruth had said, "My bracelet? Jeanette told me it was at the jeweler being cleaned. That was 4 months ago." He confronted Jeanette. She admitted she had sold it. Then he told the rest of the family. After that, Jeanette's phone went quiet. Ruth asked me to visit her that Saturday. "I want to hear it from you," she said. "Not from them." On day 7, my mother posted a long emotional status on Facebook. "Our family is going through a difficult season. We ask for your prayers and your grace." No one liked it. No one commented. Her 2 Bible study friends had already unfriended her. 1 week. That was all it took. Not for everything to fall apart. It had been falling apart for years. 1 week was just how long it took for the glue to dissolve. And the glue had been me. It had always been me. A month passed. The dust didn't exactly settle. It rearranged itself. One morning, I sat down with my banking app and a cup of coffee, and I finally did the math I should have done years earlier. That $2,100 a month I had been sending to my family? Here is where it went now. My student loans were paid off in 6 weeks. The remaining balance had been $3,800. Gone. For the first time in my life, I opened a retirement account. I was 30 years old, and I had never put a single dollar toward my own future. I set up an automatic deposit, $200 a month to start. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was mine. I also booked a visit with Grandma Ruth, not just a quick 40-minute drive, a real visit, 2 full days, a hotel nearby. Enough time to spend the mornings with her without rushing back to someone else's needs. At the hospital, nobody brought up that night, not once. Marcus greeted me the same way he always had, a brief nod, straight to business. But then he assigned me to the new trauma protocol committee. It meant more responsibility. It also meant trust. And I accepted that. Carla and I started having lunch together every Wednesday. We never had before. She told me about her daughter's soccer games. I told her about Grandma Ruth and her crossword puzzle obsession. Normal things, simple things, easy things. One Saturday, I walked into a hardware store and bought a pothos plant for $5. I brought it home and set it on my kitchen counter, right in the spot where my phone used to sit while I calculated how much of myself I owed to everyone else. That evening, Naomi texted me, "How does freedom taste?" I took a picture of the plant and sent it back, like a $5 plant from the hardware store. She sent back a row of laughing emojis. I smiled at my phone in my quiet apartment, and for the first time, it didn't feel empty. 6 weeks later, I walked out of the hospital after a double shift. My feet were aching, my scrubs smelled like antiseptic, and all I could think about was leftover pasta and my couch. Then I saw her. My mother was standing beside my car with her arms folded, no coat, even though it was barely 40 degrees outside. "Faith? Mom, I'm your mother. You can't just shut me out." I unlocked my car and set my bag on the passenger seat. "I didn't shut you out," I said. "I stopped sending money. Those are not the same thing. We need to talk." "Then talk." She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. I did what I thought was right. That intervention came from love, faith, even if you refuse to see it. I leaned against my car. I was tired. Not the kind of tired a night of sleep can fix. "Mom, you wrote Dad's speech. You invited my supervisor. You encouraged Kristen to stream it. You planned it for my birthday because you knew if I didn't come I'd look ungrateful." I paused. "That wasn't love. That was a production." Her jaw tightened. "So what do you want from me?" "An apology," I said. "A real one, not a Facebook post. I'm not apologizing for caring about my daughter." "Then we're done here for now." I opened my car door. She didn't move. "Mom, I love you, but I'm not going to let you treat me like a bank account and then call me selfish when I finally set a limit. When you're ready to actually talk, you have my number." I got in, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot. In the rearview mirror, she stood exactly where I had left her, getting smaller and smaller. I cried on the drive home. For the first time since that night. Not because I regretted anything, because it still hurt. Loving someone and accepting the way they treat you are two very different things. I chose love. I just stopped accepting the rest. So let me tell you where everyone ended up. My parents officially separated. My father moved into a 1-bedroom apartment near the hardware store on 5th. After the party, he tried calling Linda, the woman from the recording. She didn't answer. Turns out, Linda had a husband, 2 kids, and a mortgage of her own. My father had been her Tuesday escape, nothing more. He lost his marriage and his fantasy in the same night. Kristen and Derek finalized their divorce 3 months later. Derek kept the house. His name was on the mortgage, his payments, his credit. Kristen moved back in with my mother, 2 women in a 3-bedroom house with almost nothing to say to each other. She deleted her TikTok permanently. All that raw, real family content was gone. Aunt Jeanette tried to avoid the situation with Grandma Ruth's bracelet. She couldn't. Grandma Ruth called her directly. I was sitting in Ruth's room at Maple Ridge when it happened. "I want the bracelet or the money," Grandma said. "You pick." Jeanette didn't have either. She had already spent the $800. The family barely speaks to her now. My mother still calls me. Not every day, not every week. Sometimes she texts, "Thinking of you?" Sometimes I respond. Sometimes I don't. There is no schedule now, no obligation, no automatic transfer. And me? I'm 31 now. I still work at the hospital. I still drive the Civic, although I finally fixed the windshield. I still visit Grandma Ruth every Saturday. I still meal prep, but now the containers are glass instead of plastic. Small upgrade. Mine. I didn't break my family. The truth did that. I just gave it a microphone. And maybe that sounds cold. But here's what I've learned. The truth doesn't harm strong things. It only exposes the things that were being held together by silence. Let me speak to you directly for a minute. I'm not telling you to record your family. I'm not telling you to walk away from people or create a scene at the next holiday dinner. Every family is different. Every situation carries its own weight. But if you're listening to this and something feels familiar, if you're the one covering bills for people who still call you ungrateful, if you're the one arriving early to set the table while someone else walks in late with a bottle of wine and gets the hug, I want you to hear this. You are not selfish for having a limit. You are not ungrateful for wanting respect. And you are not breaking your family by refusing to carry it alone. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors. You decide who comes through, when they come through, and what kind of behavior is allowed on the other side. That is not cruelty. That is clarity. My grandmother sent me a text the night of my birthday. I've probably read it 200 times since. Whatever they do tonight, remember who raised you on Saturdays. She raised me on Saturdays because my parents were too busy, too distracted, too focused on everything except me. She taught me how to do a crossword puzzle in pen. She taught me that strength does not have to be loud. She taught me that loving someone does not mean letting them drain you and then blame you for being empty. I used to think standing up for yourself meant shouting, slamming doors, and making a scene. It doesn't. Sometimes standing up for yourself means sitting quietly in a folding chair while 40 people stare at you, waiting patiently for your chance to speak. And when that moment comes, you don't have to yell. You just press play. Last week was my 31st birthday. Naomi came over. Carla brought her daughter. 2 friends from the hospital came too, along with one neighbor who always says hello in the hallway, and finally got a proper invitation. 6 people. My apartment. A cake from the bakery on Maple Street. Lemon with cream cheese frosting, because that was the flavor Grandma Ruth always ordered for my birthdays when I was little. The candles were crooked. Nobody fixed them. Nobody read a list of my flaws. Nobody set up a microphone. Nobody pointed a camera at my face. Grandma Ruth called on FaceTime. She sang Happy Birthday off-key and completely out of rhythm. Everyone in the room sang along, and it was the most beautiful mess I had ever heard. I blew out the candles. Naomi cheered. Carla's daughter asked if she could have the corner piece with extra frosting. I said yes. 1 year ago, 40 people sat in my parents' living room to tell me who I was. This year, 5 people sat in my apartment, and nobody needed to explain anything, because they already knew me. After everyone left, I washed the dishes. I stood at the sink with warm water running over my hands, my apartment quiet around me, my little plant sitting on the counter. The same counter where I used to calculate how much of my life I could afford to give away. My name is Faith Mercer. I'm 31 years old. I'm an emergency nurse in a small town in Ohio. I pay my own rent, my own bills, my own way. And for the first time in a very long time, I actually like the woman blowing out those candles. The best birthday gift I ever gave myself was the truth. The second best was silence. And the third, the one I'm still unwrapping, is the sound of my own life. Finally. Without everyone else's noise drowning it out. If you made it all the way here, thank you. Genuinely. This story was not easy to tell, and I know parts of it may not have been easy to hear. But if you've ever had to set a boundary with someone you love, if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping yourself, you are not alone. I'd love to hear from you. What is the hardest boundary you've ever had to set? Tell me in the comments, and if you want to hear another story that might hit even harder, there's one linked in the description. Click it, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.